The Odyssey was never just about going home. In this video, I'm going to list what, according to me, are the lessons that we can draw from Odyssey. The thing about great poetry, art, or cinema is that people can interpret it in completely different ways. I can look at an event or a line of dialogue in a great book or movie and take away one lesson from it, while someone else might see something completely different. And I think that's the beauty of classics. They don't give you one definite answer. They keep revealing something new to you depending on where you are in your own life. And that's what I want to do with the Odyssey in this video. Share some of the life lessons and ideas that stood out to me. So, starting with number one, the sirens. Temptation doesn't always look dangerous. The sirens don't defeat your ignorance, they defeat your willpower. And what does Odysseus do? He does the wisest thing any human being has ever done in the face of irresistible temptation, at least in that context. He doesn't trust himself. He knows his own will and he knows its shortcomings. He puts wax in the sailor's ears and he has them bind him to the mast. It's a beautiful scene in the movie. He strictly orders. He says, "No matter how I beg, do not untie me." He makes a decision while he's still free because he knows that in the moment of temptation, he won't be free. 3,000 years later, we have built the sirens. I mean, we carry them in our pockets, our phones, the feed that knows exactly what we cannot resist, the algorithm that never sleeps, never tires, and sings a song composed precisely mathematically for us. We keep telling ourselves, well, we'll resist it with our willpower. We won't do tomorrow what we did yesterday, but we generally fail. And that's the design. If you already know you're vulnerable at something, social media, NX, shopping, alcohol, procrastination, whatever, build a system that protects you when you're tempted. One of Odysseus' crewmates asks, "What was it? What was the siren singing about?" And he replies, "All the things you wanted it to be, and then all the things you wish you never wished for." It was a delicious itch that you want to scratch, but you find it under the skin and you can't reach it, so the delicious itch becomes unbearable. It told you what you most want, it what you most can't have, and what you most can't have is what you had already lost. The siren song is real. It's the voice in your mind that seduces you into believing that your unlived life is better than the one you're living right now. It's the voice that whispers, "If only I had made a different decision. If only I hadn't left the relationship. If only I had stayed." All the while becoming absent from your own reality. And I think that's why no one survives the siren song. Not because it kills your body, but it steals your presence. If you're always mourning the life you never lived, you'll never fully live the life that's already yours. So we need to stop living in an imaginary past or future and start living in our present. Once you've made a decision in life, try to make the best of it. Build something beautiful from the life you actually have instead of constantly imagining that the life that you could have had. Because sometimes the greatest temptation isn't wanting something you don't have. It's believing that the life you didn't choose would have been better. Number 2, calypso. A comfortable life isn't necessarily a meaningful life. Odysseus faced many monsters, but no one could keep him for 7 years like Calypso did. That's because Calypso offered him something no one else could: comfort. Comfort is a prison in itself. If remaining in our comfort zone is always our goal, it's going to prevent us from reaching our full potential. Comfort prevents us from taking the necessary action required to fulfill our goals in life because growth is uncomfortable. Growth isn't winning and losing. Growth isn't maybe getting rejected multiple times before you get accepted. Growth isn't trying multiple things and finally succeeding in one. All this will not be possible if we remain in our comfort zone and we don't try. Odysseus has comfort, food, beauty, and immortality offered to him on Calypso's island. Yet he is miserable because none of it is his life. He wants Ithaca and Penelope. Sometimes we stay in situations because they're comfortable, even though something inside us knows we're not supposed to be here. We're not supposed to be in it. Purpose in life is very important. We can lose ourselves if we don't have a purpose. Number three, Polyphemus, the Cyclops. Pride can make you create your own problems. After escaping the Cyclops, Odysseus can't resist telling Polyphemus who defeated him. The moment of pride, that particular moment of pride gives Polyphemus the information he needs to curse Odysseus. He asks his father Poseidon to ruin Odysseus, which contributes to Odysseus' enormously prolonged journey home. So, life lesson from this incident is sometimes the hardest thing isn't winning, it's knowing when to stop. You don't always need the last word. You don't always need people to know you were right. And sometimes proving yourself only creates another problem. You don't always have to prove that you won. There are situations where you have already escaped, already succeeded, already protected yourself, and yet your ego wants one final thing. Guess what it is? Recognition. You want the other person to know that they were wrong about you, that you were right, and that you won, that they lost, that they hurt you, but you didn't break. They didn't break you, that you are doing better, better without them. And sometimes that desire for recognition is exactly what pulls you back into the situation. That situation that you already escaped from. Odysseus' mistake comes at precisely the moment when he has demonstrated, incredible intelligence. He doesn't fail because he's stupid. He fails because his strength has a weakness attached to it. He's clever, he's brave, he's resourceful, he's a great leader, but he also has an enormous ego. And that's interesting because it applies to all of us. Our greatest strengths can sometimes become our weaknesses when taken too far. Confidence can become arrogance. Independence can become isolation. Ambition can become obsession. Loyalty can become self sacrifice. And intelligence can become the belief that we are always the smartest person in the room. How often do we do that? Do the same thing? We leave a relationship, but then we want the other person to know what they lost. We leave a job, but we want our old colleagues to know that they underestimated us. We end an argument, but we can't sleep until the other person admits that we were right. We post something online not because we want to share it, but because we want one particular person to see it. Sometimes we don't actually want revenge, we just want recognition. We want the other person to know I was right, you were wrong, and you hurt me, but you didn't break me. But maybe that's exactly where we need to learn from Odysseus. We don't always have to announce our victory. Sometimes winning means leaving the battlefield without needing the other person to know that we won. Because the moment you need them to acknowledge your victory, you're still giving them power over you. 4. Xenia's Law. How we treat people reveal who we are. Your character is revealed by how you treat people who can't benefit you. How we treat people who have nothing to offer us tells us something about who we are. One of the most important ideas in the Odyssey is something called xenia, the ancient Greek idea of hospitality. When a stranger arrived at your door, you were expected to offer them food, shelter, safety before even asking who they were. And I find that idea surprisingly relevant today because we tend to be kind to people we need. We polite to our bosses, we are charming around people we want to impress. We're generous when we know the person can do something for us. But what about the person who can't give you anything? The waiter who's serving you, the security guard at your building, the junior person at work, the stranger you'll probably never see again. How we treat people who have nothing to offer us tells us a lot more about our character than how we treat people who can benefit us. Be kind even when there is no reward for being kind. 5. Odysseus turned beggar. The art of reinventing yourself. Sometimes you have to become a stranger to survive. When Odysseus returns to Ithaca, he disguises himself as a beggar. And that is interesting because the great warrior, the famous Odysseus, has to temporarily let go of his identity. Life lesson from this incident is that there are times in life when you have to put your ego aside and become a beginner again. You may have to enter a new career, ask for help, admit you don't know something, or quietly observe before making your move. Your old identity isn't always useful in your next chapter. One of the most interesting thing Odysseus does when he finally returns to Ithaca is something we don't usually associate with a hero. He hides. Athena disguises him as an old beggar and he walks into his own kingdom looking like somebody no one would pay attention to. And I think there's a surprisingly powerful lesson in that. Sometimes you have to become a stranger to survive. Odysseus was a king, he was a warrior, he was famous for his intelligence. But none of those identities could help him in that moment. So he lets go of them. And because nobody recognizes him, he gets something incredibly valuable, the ability to observe. He can see how people behave when they think the king isn't watching. He discovers who is loyal, who's cruel, who is simply taking advantage of his absence. And I think we can use this idea in our lives too. We often become very attached to who we think we are. I'm successful. I'm confident. I'm the smart one. I'm good at this. I've always been this kind of person. But what happens when life forces you into a situation where you're none of those things anymore? Where you have to let go of your old identities that you've been holding on to. Maybe you start a new career. Maybe you move to a new city. Maybe you leave a relationship. Maybe you start something you've never done before. Suddenly, you're a beginner again. And that's uncomfortable because nobody knows you. But maybe that's not always a bad thing. Sometimes being unknown gives you the freedom to reinvent yourself. You don't have to walk into every new chapter in life proving who you were in the last one. You can listen, you can observe, you can learn. You can even allow people to underestimate you, for a while. Because being underestimated isn't the same as being weak. And starting from zero isn't the same as having nothing. Sometimes you have to let an older version of yourself disappear before a new one has the room to emerge. Odysseus didn't stop being a king when he dressed like a beggar. He simply understood that there was a time to hide his identity and there was a time to reveal it. And maybe that's the lesson. You don't always have to show the world who you are. Sometimes you just need to quietly become the person that you're meant to be. Point number 6, Ethica, The journey matters more than the destination. Odysseus spends years trying, to get back to Ithaca. And when he finally gets there, he discovers that returning home isn't simply about reaching a physical place. He has changed along the way. Life lesson from this incident is we often think once I get that job, that relationship, money, success, I'll finally be happy. But life is happening during the journey, not after we reach the destination. Maybe that's what the Odyssey is trying to tell us. We spend so much of our lives trying to reach our own Ithaca, thinking that once we get there, everything will finally make sense. But perhaps the point was never simply to reach Ithaca. Perhaps it was to become the person who could finally recognize it as home. It's the life lesson we learn and the wisdom we gain in this beautiful odyssey called life.